Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. It started with a knock at the door, quiet, hesitant, like someone unsure if they belonged. Al hadn't expected anyone that night, especially not him. But there he was, standing on the porch in a wrinkled hoodie, holding nothing but a duffel bag and a tired smile. "Hey," he said, trying to sound casual. "You said if I ever needed a place." I hadn't seen him in months. My ex's son, well, stepson, technically from a marriage that ended quietly and fast. We were never close, but there was always this, something unspoken. I let him in. The couch was still warm from the summer heat, and the air between us buzzed with unspoken questions. He was older now, 23, grown into a man with a sharper jawline and calmer eyes. I gave him a blanket and a late-night sandwich, pretending it was nothing, pretending I didn't feel that sudden shift in the air. Maybe it was the wine I'd had. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, not like a lost kid anymore, but like someone trying to figure out if he was still just welcome on my couch, or if he belonged somewhere else. The days passed slowly, filled with small talk and glances that lingered too long. I told myself I was imagining things, that the tension was all in my head. But late one night, I found him not on the couch, but standing at my bedroom door. Just standing there. I asked if something was wrong. He just looked at me, eyes darker than usual, voice soft. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Can I sit with you for a bit?" And maybe I should have said no. Maybe I should have reminded him of the past, the ties, the reasons why we shouldn't blur this line. But I didn't. And that's when everything started to change. There was no script, no plan, just a quiet storm building in the silence between us. Conversations got deeper, the distance shorter. He started opening up, telling me things he hadn't told anyone. About his mom. About how lost he felt. About how I was the only one who ever made him feel at home. And I listened. I shouldn't have leaned in. I shouldn't have cared that much. But I did. Maybe too much. And one morning, he wasn't on the couch. He was next to me. The sun hadn't even risen, and I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what we'd done, or what we were about to do. My heart pounded like it knew something my mind refused to say out loud. Because this wasn't just a mistake, it felt like something bigger. Something dangerous. Something real. But what happened after that morning, that's the part no one saw coming. The silence in the room that morning said more than either of us could. I didn't move. Neither did he. Just the slow rhythm of our breathing and the soft light from the window creeping across the sheets. He didn't touch me, but he didn't move away either. It was like both of us were waiting for the other to speak first, to explain how we ended up here, or maybe hoping no one would. I closed my eyes, pretending to sleep, hoping that maybe when I opened them, he'd be back on the couch and this would all feel less intimate. But Al didn't go. He stayed. That whole day felt off, like the world had shifted just a little. He moved around the kitchen like nothing happened, laughing lightly when I handed him coffee, thanking me like always. But there was something different in the way he looked at me now. Not like a guest. Not like someone passing through. Like he was searching for a reason to stay, or maybe just waiting for me to tell him to leave. Later that evening, we sat outside. The sky was deep blue, the air thick with summer heat and unsaid words. He talked about his past again, his failed attempts at finding a place to belong. "I've crashed on so many couches," he said, not looking at me. "But this one, this place, it doesn't feel temporary." I didn't know what to say. He wasn't just talking about the furniture, and we both knew it. I wanted to tell him to stop, not just the words, but the feelings building between us. But part of me didn't want it to stop at all. There was something pulling me in, even though everything in me screamed that it was too complicated. Too fast. Too wrong by the world's standards. But was it? We weren't related. We hadn't spoken in over 2 years. And yet, those invisible lines we never dared to cross were starting to blur with every shared glance, every accidental brush of the hands. And then came the message. Late that night, his phone buzzed. I caught a glimpse, just enough to see a name I hadn't heard in a long time. His mother. My ex. She was coming into town. No date, no details. Just a short message. Need to talk. It's important. He didn't say a word about it. And I didn't ask. But I knew then something was coming. Something that would change everything. The next few days felt like walking on the edge of something I couldn't name. Al acted like nothing had changed, but everything had. The way he lingered when I spoke, the way his eyes searched my face when he thought I wasn't looking, the way he found little excuses to be near me, it was all too intentional now. And yet, we didn't talk about that morning. We didn't talk about the message from his mom either. But I could feel it between us like static, quiet, building, dangerous. He started staying up later, sitting with me in the living room, watching old movies and talking like we were old friends instead of whatever it was we were becoming. I told myself I was just being kind, just being open. But the way my heart jumped when he smiled? That wasn't kindness. That was something else entirely. Something I had buried for years. I should have put distance between us. Instead, I let it grow. One night, we were watching a film when the power flickered and cut out. The whole house went still and quiet, like the universe was giving us a moment to face the truth. I stood to find a flashlight, but he touched my arm gently, barely, and said, "It's okay. I don't mind the dark." And then he looked at me, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. That look wasn't confusion or curiosity anymore. It was want. Real, steady, patient want. And it scared me more than anything else. That same night, while we sat in the dim light of my phone, he told me something that shifted everything again. His voice was low, like he was afraid of what he was about to admit. "When Mom left, you were the only person who treated me like I mattered. She thought you were too quiet, too distant. But I saw the way you listened. I saw how you never judged me. You were the first real home I had." I didn't know how to respond to that. I wanted to reach out. I wanted to stop whatever was happening, but I also didn't. And then came another message. This one was longer. His mom was arriving next week. She wanted to stay for a few days. She had no idea he was here. No idea what was unfolding between us. And suddenly, everything we'd been pretending wasn't happening became too real. At the same time, I started receiving calls from a mutual friend I hadn't spoken to since the divorce. She asked if I'd seen Elle lately. Said he'd been keeping secrets, avoiding people. Her voice was tight, like she knew something I didn't. "Just be careful," she said before hanging up. Now I couldn't sleep. I kept wondering, was Al here because he needed shelter, or was he looking for something deeper? Something more dangerous? The more I tried to make sense of it, the more tangled everything became. Because deep down, I didn't know if I was protecting him, or if I was about to need protecting from him. The night before his mom was supposed to arrive, the air inside the house felt heavier than ever. I couldn't shake the tension, couldn't stop the way my hands kept finding reasons to stay busy folding laundry that was already folded, wiping down counters that were already clean. Al was quiet too. Too quiet. He sat on the edge of the couch, staring out the window like he was waiting for something or someone to pull him out of the moment. I wanted to ask him what he was thinking, but I already knew the answer. We were both waiting for the same thing, the moment this fragile space between us would snap. One word, one move, and everything we had danced around would either come crashing down or explode into something we couldn't take back. He stood and walked to the kitchen without saying a word, pouring himself a glass of water with shaking hands. And that's when I asked the question I'd been avoiding for days. "Why did you really come here, Al?" He turned slowly, not surprised. Like he'd been waiting for me to finally say it out loud. He didn't answer right away. He just set the glass down and looked at me with this mix of guilt and something else, something deeper. "I came here because you're the only one who ever saw me. Really saw me. I didn't come to mess anything up. I came because I didn't know where else to go." I stepped back, heart pounding. His words felt honest, but they didn't make things easier. If anything, they made the lines between us even harder to hold. Before I could respond, a car pulled into the driveway. The headlights flashed across the living room wall, and I froze. So did he. It was her. His mom. We both stared at the door like it might disappear. Neither of us moved. The knock came a second later, sharp, direct, like it already knew something wasn't right inside. He looked at me once more, his face pale, his eyes asking a silent question. "What do we do now?" And I didn't have an answer. Al moved toward the door slowly, like each step took everything he had. I stayed behind, hands gripping the back of the kitchen chair, my breath shallow. The second knock came, louder this time. When he opened the door, she stood there, his mom, the woman I hadn't seen since the divorce. She looked almost exactly the same, except now her eyes were sharper. Like she already knew something she hadn't said yet. She stepped in without waiting to be invited. "So this is where you've been hiding," she said, glancing around the room like it offended her. Then her eyes landed on me, and for a moment, the air stopped moving. "Didn't expect to find you here," she added with a tight smile. Al didn't say a word. Neither did I. But the way she looked between us made it clear she sensed something. Maybe she always had. We sat in silence for a while, her on the edge of the couch, Al standing behind her like a bodyguard. She finally broke it. "You didn't answer my messages." I was worried. Her voice softened, but it didn't feel warm. It felt calculated. I tried to stay quiet, but something about the way she talked like she owned the moment made me uneasy. Then came the twist. She turned to me and said, "I need to talk to you. Alone." Al hesitated, but I nodded. He left the room, though I could still hear his footsteps just down the hall. She leaned in, her voice slow. "He's not okay," she said. "He didn't tell you, did he? About what happened before he showed up here?" My heart dropped. She went on. "He had a breakdown. He quit his job. He left his apartment without notice. He's been spiraling, and I've been trying to keep it quiet. I didn't think he'd come here to you." I stared at her, stunned. "He didn't tell me anything." She leaned back, folding her arms. "I get it. You feel bad for him. Maybe even something else." Her eyes narrowed. "But you have no idea what's really going on. Don't let your guilt, or whatever this is, get in the way of helping him. Because you're not helping. You're just giving him a place to escape." That hit hard. Al walked back and then, eyes bouncing between us like he felt the shift. He knew something had been said, but didn't ask. He didn't have to. We both wore it on our faces. I felt everything spin then, the tension, the secrets, the looks, the words unsaid. Because now I didn't just have questions about us. Now I had questions about him. Why did he really come here? What was he running from? And why did it feel like he wasn't telling me everything? Al stood there in the hallway, eyes flickering between us. He knew. He felt the shift in energy, the cold space left by whatever his mom had just laid on the table. But instead of asking, he said something that neither of us saw coming. "I wasn't running. I was trying to breathe." His voice cracked just enough to make the room fall silent. He stepped forward, glancing at both of us like he was finally ready to drop the weight he'd been carrying. "Yes, I left my job." I broke down. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want pity. I didn't come here to hide. I came here because it was the only place that ever felt real." I could see the way his mother looked at him like a stranger. Her control over the situation was slipping, and she knew it. She opened her mouth to speak, but Al kept going. "You always made me feel like I was too much. Too emotional. Too lost." But she didn't. He looked at me then, and for a second, the world around us went quiet again. That should have been the ending. But it wasn't. Because then she said it. Calmly. Coldly. "You're not just lost, Al. You're still legally tied to her estate." I froze. "What?" I asked, barely above a whisper. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. "When you divorced me, you didn't update the legal papers. His name's still linked to the house. If anything happens, if he breaks down again, or something worse, it could fall back on you." Al's face went pale. That was the twist none of us expected. I had thought the danger was emotional, that the lines we crossed were just personal. But now there were legal ties. Real consequences. And suddenly, it wasn't just about what we felt, it was about what we'd become tangled in. Love, confusion, responsibility, and something dangerously close to betrayal. And yet, when Al reached for my hand, I didn't pull away. Because even with everything crashing around us, something about that moment still felt real. Let me know if you'd like the epilogue or want the series to continue. Al didn't say anything for a long time after his mom's bombshell. He just sat on the edge of the couch, his hand still holding mine, eyes distant like he was trying to process too many truths at once. I sat beside him, feeling the weight of everything, not just the legal mess, but the emotional wreckage we had tiptoed around for weeks. His mom stood quietly, no longer confrontational, just tired. Whatever power she thought she had over him had clearly slipped through her fingers. Later that night, after she left without much of a goodbye, I found Al outside on the back porch, staring up at the sky. He looked calm, finally, like something inside him had settled. "I'll fix it," he said quietly. "I'll clear my name from the paperwork. I'll do whatever it takes so this doesn't land on you." I nodded, not just for that, but for everything. "And after that?" I asked. He turned toward me, the porch light casting a soft glow on his face. "After that, I hope we figure out what this really is. Without the fear. Without the past hanging over us." It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was real. In the weeks that followed, he did what he said he would. Papers were filed, legal ties cut clean. He found a new job, something stable, something that gave him structure. And me? I stopped overthinking every moment. I let things breathe. We didn't rush anything. We didn't try to label what we had too fast. But we talked. We laughed. We let the quiet be safe again. And somehow, that became everything. Not just love, not just attraction, but something solid, something steady. Because in the end, this wasn't just a story about who slept where. It was about finding home in someone, even when everything around you feels like it's falling apart. If this ending moved you, tell us in the comments what you felt. Did Al make the right decision? Do you think they belong together? Would you like a sequel?